game number 3 of the FIDE World Chess Championship. We have Jan Nepomniachtchi against Ding Liren, and below me here we have Coach JD. What's up, JD?
Ooh. Hey, I just wanted to jump in because like this is one of my favorite lines that they got. So it's like pretty exciting to see a line that you play happen in the World Championship.
Yeah, and this line comes from the ChessGoals Classical 1D4 course, now called the Queen's Gambit course. Okay, we see D4 by Jan. Typically he plays E4, so I think he's kind of testing the waters, seeing what Ding wants to do.
And I hope he continues to test the waters because like this could be really instructional for all of us that follow the chess goals course.
Dude, yeah, if they're like working out all these QGD lines. Okay, so now we see E6 standard by Ding, knight C3, and typically here you'll see knight to F3 and maybe G3 going for a Catalan by Jan. It's a little rare that he allows the Nimzo-Indian, which is one of the main weapons for Ding. But here Ding plays D5. What do you think?
I'm immediately excited because this is my favorite lines in the whole game. Although I would have been interested had they played a Nimzo to see what Ian has cooked up against the Nimzo because you just really don't see that a lot. They don't allow it. They play this knight F3 or G3, not allowing a traditional Nimzo. So I am curious what Ding clearly, or not Ding, but Ian clearly had something prepared in the event that the Nimzo happened, and I'm curious to see what it was.
Yeah, and it was probably something sharp too. Maybe we'll see one coming up. Um,
Yeah.
so 52 out of 57 games, Nimzo-Indian. So we're in very rare territory. C takes D. Almost all the grandmasters play this. We're in now the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit decline. Takes bishop G5, C6. What are your thoughts on C6? This is what all the GMs play lately instead of bishop E7.
I think the idea is that they want to have the option of going into the short middle game. So, for example, go something like this, and then we get this kind of a structure. And I think that as ugly as this is for Black, it's supposed to be quite holdable. I mean, Black doesn't really seem to be playing for a lot, but they do have this option to go in this end game. And this is honestly pretty obnoxious from the White's point of view because it looks so bad for Black, but it's just not bad. And it's frustrating because it looks worse than it is.
And the engine tells you that white has this advantage too, and you just can't figure out how to win from the white
Yeah,
side.
it's just not as easy. I mean, Nigel Short started playing this, which is why it's the short variation. Started playing this years ago, maybe even against in his World Championship match with Kasparov. I don't remember. But yeah, this is what C6 is aiming for.
So we do see E3 and H6. And at this point, Jan has only faced bishop E7. So there's no Jan Nepomniachtchi games from the white side here. We are following 3 games from Ding Liren in this position. And he did play H6 in all 3. So now we have bishop H4, bishop E7, bishop D3. Any tidbits from the opening here?
So far, this is all standard. I mean, I've faced this H6 countless times. I mean, at various move orders. At the point that he played it, sometimes they delay it and play it now. But this H6 move happens a lot. I think because people know that we're going to play Queen C2, and they're worried about this pressure here. Even though honestly, it's not real pressure. H6 is not mandatory whatsoever.
Yeah, and as long as Black's not afraid of getting G4, G5 coming at them, there's really no downside of H6. I think it can be a useful move. Avoid back rank mates, which some people fall for quite often. So
There is one downside and maybe we'll get to it in a bit, but I will point out one small downside.
okay. And one interesting thing I found in the database, we're following Geary against Ding from an online rapid game for 17 moves. So exact move order. So Queen C2, Rook E8, Knight E2. This is what we do in our Queen's Gambit course, but the knight on E2. It's also similar to our Caro Kann course with colors reversed. Same kind of
For sure.
strategies. And now we see this move A5, and you've had some notes on this. What do you think of A5?
These A5 waters are the most challenging. The idea typically is they're going to play A5 and B4, and it looks like this pawn is super weak. But they get a lot of counterplay on the king side. The line that I have against this in my notes was to play H3 here. Jan played A3, and it goes something like B5, and then this really interesting move that I found is to play knight to B1. And so we're not getting this with tempo. And we're actually taking advantage of the fact that we've put this knight on G2, and we want to come place this knight onto the F3 square. And I think the kind of one of the big points here is that against A5 and B5, F3 and E4, not such a great idea. And so we just want to transfer this knight to F3 and sort of play it like a more classical Queen's Gambit decline, where we're going to try to go for some sort of minority attack ideas or some play down the C file. So my line goes something like B6. We bring this knight here. They come in with the bishop, and we put some pressure. Note that this pawn appeared to be hanging, but that's a really great way to get your queen trapped. And coming across to F3, now B4 comes in, and we can kick this knight, and we get some trades. But eventually we can try to win this pawn, and we do get a decent advantage against pretty reasonable play from black in this way. This is my plan if I ever face this A5 move that Jan faced. He, of course, chose A3, which seems to be playing. I know A3 is a move, but usually you're waiting for B5 for that. And you're trying to stop this B4 or at least make it less fun. I'm not sure what the idea against why he played it immediately. Do you have any thoughts here?
I don't. I kind of like your setup with H3. I think he might still be planning the same thing, though. If B5 here, maybe knight to B1 with a similar setup, because I really like that strategy. Let black advance and then play against the C pawn. Okay, so knight H5, offering the bishop trade. Bishop takes, queen takes, rook E1. Now, if you look at the engine, it does say that white has maybe a quarter pawn, half a pawn advantage. So comfortable position for Jan, but Ding's definitely solid here.
Yeah, and this rook to E1 indicates that he's still very much planning to play F3 and try to play E4. This idea of bringing the rook to E1 when there's been an early exchange of the dark squared bishops and the queens here, and you can't play F3 because it's attacked, is a pretty common idea to play rook E1. You move this knight somewhere, or sometimes you play this knight to here to defend the pawn, or move this knight out of the way. But either way, he's still clearly indicating that he's going to go F3, E4. And then, go ahead.
Strong players from the black side always try to prevent it, right? Usually if you get it in, it's really good for white.
Yeah, but a strong player from the black side's not going to let you get it in that easily. And now that this knight is on F8, I wanted to point out a small point of why H6 is not so... It does have a drawback. And the point is that you can't play knight to G3, knight to G6 anymore. And sometimes that's a pretty attractive move, especially when there's still a bishop setting on H4, because it comes with tempo. And now that you've played H6, you've removed that possibility, and you're kind of forced to either leave the knight on F8 or come out to E6, which E6 is honestly often a better square anyway, especially now that the dark square bishops have been exchanged and you've played H6, but you have committed yourself to this E6 square instead of G6 when you play H6.
Yeah, so it limits Ding's options a little bit. Now we see knight to C1, knight F6, and here's F3. So we have both rooks, E and F files. We're looking for E4. So you got the knight guarding that square, bishop, queen, everything's ready to go for white. And now knight to E6, perfect timing, putting the pressure on the D4 pawn. So now it's not as easy to play pawn to E4. Oh, and here's the first move where we deviate from the Anish game. Knight 1 to E2. Anish here played queen to F2, and the game went on to be a draw. So now we're actually in completely new territory, but it took 17 moves this game.
I do like this queen F2 idea. It's a familiar idea that we should be aware with. The point is that we want to come here, we defend this pawn, and after we push, takes, we're already lined up against F7, is kind of the idea behind this queen F2 maneuver.
And we have a line like that in the Carol course. When the colors are reversed, we do that same thing. So I like it too. Okay, knight E2. Now we see C5. This is also a common idea when you have this strong pawn structure with F3, E3, D4. Play C5 from the black side, or colors are reversed from the white side. And the idea is if this pawn tries to push, you have the tension on this other color complex. And it kind of makes the game more balanced. I think black has something to fight for. Bishop B5, rook B8, takes. Okay, what do you think about this structure, JD? We got the isolated pawn, but with the pawn up on F3, this pawn on E3 is a bit of a liability for white.
Yeah, the pawn on F3 in this structure where we have this isolated queen pawn is really kind of double-edged. As you point out, the drawback is that E3 is soft. But The advantage is that there will never be knight to e4, which knight to e4 is essentially how black is planning to launch their attack. Is if they can establish a knight on e4, that's going to be a big source of counterplay for them, and they don't have that. But what they do have is some niggling pressure against this e3 pawn, but I really don't think it's that hard to defend. I mean, if nothing else, we can always play king to f2, and we can shuffle our rooks across here and try to put some pressure on this pawn. I think ideally what white wants to do from this position is trade off the minor pieces and get themselves into a major piece endgame where they can double up everything on the d file and eventually try to break with e4.
I think you're right. And I think black wants to make it more of a waiting game. Keep the pieces on the board, try to poke and prod at white's position. So we see queen d2, bishop to d7. So it is a trade offer by black, but that was a terrible bishop on c8. Take, knight to d4. So blockading the isolated pawn. Knight b6. And I feel this is kind of an just equal position. What do you think? Do you prefer either side here?
I do also agree that it's kind of an equal position, and I wouldn't feel particularly confident with either side. I mean, especially with knight c4 coming, he doesn't have e4, so he switched across to c4, and this is a really annoying knight, and I don't see a great way to try to get rid of it. I actually almost wonder if Jan didn't miss a better opportunity after this. And instead of going this bishop b5, going directly into this, but instead trying to play f4. I think this could have been an interesting way to play. The point being that, we can of course take back with the pawn, but now we hit the queen, and the queen's got to move.
Yeah.
Somewhere we take, and here we could even trade rooks and misplace. So if you try to avoid that, well, now we have d takes c5. You got to take with the rook. We come here, and this is a similar structure, except we don't have this e3 weakness. We still have this, and we've managed to trade off a few more pieces, and somehow this feels potentially a bit more pressing to me than the way that Jan chose.
There's a good chance that the d5 pawn drops in these lines. We don't have to go super deep, but it's going to be hard to hold for black. So I like it too, knight f4. Okay, let's jump back to the game position. Right around here, takes, knight b6. And I agree with you. I think Ding, this is a huge win for him. It's the first game of the match where he, it was at least equal or maybe pressing very slightly into the middle game. Like, if you had to pick one side here, it's probably black with that knight coming to c4. Queen f2. Pokes at the queen. She retreats. Rook e1, so both sides are just trying to improve the position. Queen to f6. And at some point, you could consider knight takes d4, but like JD said, that's kind of what white wants. Put the pieces on the d file, put pressure on d5. Knight to b5. Knight c7. Uh-oh, what's happening?
A repetition. It seems they've both lost their will here. I mean, but honestly, this is probably a good result for both sides. Jan just won, so he's happy to just maintain his advantage. Ding just lost, so he's happy to draw from a position of relative strength. I mean, he was never in any serious trouble. If anything, he had some slight pressure earlier in the game. So I think that both players are pretty reasonably happy with the way that this game went.
Yep, I think so too. And it's going to be exciting to see what Ding plays tomorrow from the white side. We'll have a recap of that game as soon as it ends. And we got to make a quick plug, JD. We have a Queen's Gambit course, link down in the description. JD's a Queen's Gambit expert. He's working on some advanced content, including these type of lines. So it's going to be really cool to see if they keep playing these lines, JD.
And yeah, I really hope they do. Maybe I'll rewrite the course.
There you go. Add these games in. And then last thing is, check the link in the description. We have a live game analysis coming up. So make sure to sign up for that free game analysis on YouTube. Get your games analyzed. Any last thoughts, JD?
Nope. I just looking forward to see if we get more of this from Jan. I'm really anxious to see what happens.
Me too. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye, guys.